Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. It's nice to be back. I missed a couple of days. I was under the weather, and that's why I'm trying to squeeze in a share here on Erev Shabbos. Although we don't typically have share on Erev Shabbos, I'm trying to squeeze in an extra share so we don't fall further behind the Dirshu schedule. I'm trying to catch up to the Dirshu schedule. Certainly don't want to fall further behind. So I hope to cover in today's share limud gimel amud beis, but let's take it one piece at a time. We have to begin on limud gimel amud aleph, 2 lines from the bottom of the Shulchan Aruch, Siman kuf nun aleph sif yod aleph. Of course, we're continuing to learn Hilchos Bais HaKnesses, the halachas that govern how we are to comport ourselves while we're in a Bais HaKnesses or a Bais HaMedrash. So we started Sif Yod Aleph in the previous share, but since we had a bit of a break here, and since this is a complex sugya and very much nogea Halacha L'maisa, I want to start again from the beginning of Sif Yod Aleph. Says the Mechaber, 2 lines from the bottom, Lamed Gimel Amid Aleph. In Bishas Binyan Bais HaKnesses, if at the time of the building of a Bais HaKnesses, a shul. Now we have to be medayik very, very carefully in every word of the Mechaber here. So the Mechaber says, if at the time of the construction of a Bais HaKnesses, hisnu alav, they made a condition, they made a t'nai, lehistamish bay, which would allow them to make use of the Bais HaKnesses for other uses. So in other words, they got together to build a shul, and when they got together to build the shul, the board, whoever it is that's in charge of the construction of the shul, they got together and they said, we remember learning Siman Kuf Nun Aleph, there are a lot of things that it's not a davar pashut to do inside a shul. It's not so simple to have a kiddush in the shul. It's not so simple, especially if people are going to be sitting around and schmoozing. It's not so simple, not so pashut to have a coffee and cake inside the shul. We want to build the shul al tanai. We're making a Tanai Mikainim Lamaisa. This Shabbos, Parshas Matas and Masai, is really the Parsha of Tanai. This is where we have the Bnei Gad, the Bnei Ruvain, all of the halachas of Tanai, Tanai Kafel, all come from this week's Parsha. So we're making a Tanai Kainim Lamaisa that we do not want to invest the shul with that level of Kedusha. We want to make the shul al Tanai, that we should be allowed to do these things. So what's the halacha if they make such a Tanai? Says the Mechaber, muter lehishtamish by bechorbanoi. You would be allowed to be mishtamish in that area of the Bais HaKnesses after it's nebuch destroyed. Aval b'yeshuvai loy mahani Tanai. But so long as the shul is inhabited and used, as long as it's a functioning Bais HaKnesses, the Tanai does not help. You made a Tanai, as long as the shul is a shul, the Tanai doesn't help. If the day will come, the people moved out of town, nobody's using the shul is already decrepit, now already the Tanai will help. Now you're allowed to be mishtamish in that area, even though it was once a Bais HaKnesses. Let's remember that in Sif Yud we learned, Afilu la'acher shecharvu adayin heid b'kedushasan. We learned in Sif Yud that even after a Bais HaKnesses is destroyed, it still retains its Kedusha. Says the Mechaber in Sif Yud Aleph, if you made a Tanai when you built the shul, that the Tanai helps so that b'chorbanai, the Kedusha is going to go off, and now b'chorbanai, you could be mishtamish. Now, first of all, does the Kedusha go off entirely? Well, let's see what the Mechaber says here. The Mechaber continues at the bottom line, middle of the line, Va'afilu b'chorbanai, but even when the shul is already destroyed, and you made a Tanai when you built it, L'tashbish meguna, to use that area for a disgraceful type of usage, kigon zriya, to go plant things there, to make a garden out of it, to grow crops, v'cheshbonai sharabim, or to use it as a conference room, as a gathering place, to get together to make cheshbonos for the rabbim, loy mahani tana, the Tanai would not help for that at all. Now let's just finish here in the Mechaber. Now the Mechaber says, Bamed dvar mamurim, this whole discussion is only germane, bebate k'niyesiyah shebechutz la'aretz. It bate k'niyesiyah outside of Eretz Yisrael and chutz la'aretz. Avo bebate k'niyesiyah sheb Eretz Yisrael, loy mahani shum Tanai. In Eretz Yisrael, all bets are off. There's no tanoim on a shul in Eretz Yisrael at all. So, okay, what do we get from a simple reading of the Mechaber over here? A few things. First of all, you want to make a shul al tanai, that it shouldn't be invested with this level of kedusha, that you can't be mishtamish in the Bais HaKnesses. So first of all, in Eretz Yisrael, you can't make any tanai. In Chutz La'aretz, you can make a tanai, but the tanai is not going to help you anything at all as long as the shul is a functioning shul. The tanai is only going to help you bechurbanai. The tanai is only going to help when the shul is no longer a shul and it's destroyed. Then the tanai will help. And even then, the tanai will not make that it's mamish a makom chayil, that it's a place that's, it's chayil, it's chulin, and you can do whatever you want over there. There always will be a vestige of kedusha. You can't go plant tomatoes over there, and you can't use it as a gathering place to make cheshbonos. Another thing that we glean from a simple reading of the Mechaber is that any tanai that you're going to make has to be made b'shas binyan, right? Because that's how he opens up the sif. In b'shas binyan, Bais HaKnesses hisnu alav. What if you didn't make the tanai b'shas binyan? What if you woke up to make the tanai 6 months after the Chanukah Sabayis? Now it's already too late. You didn't make the tanai b'shas binyan. Another thing that we could glean from this Suf Yud Aleph is seemingly you have to actually go ahead and verbalize it tonight. In b'shas binyan Bais HaKnesses hisnu alav. What if you didn't make it tonight? And now 6 years later, you want to say, well, we didn't actually make it tonight, but isn't the Tanai just assumed? I mean, this is how everybody acts. Can we just say that the Tanai was assumed even though we didn't make it? It would seem from a simple reading of the Mechaber that that would not work. Now, everything that I just told you, I'm pointing out to you, this is what comes from a simple reading of the Mechaber. Now, let's do a little bit more of a deep dive into the Mechaber over here and into the Halacha. And what we're going to do something very atypical. And the first thing I'm going to do is go straight to a Bir Halacha. And that is Bir Halacha Dibra Maschil Aval B'Yishuvay V'chulei, which in my Mishnah Berurah, it is on Lamed Gimel, Amud Aleph. It's the second to last Dibra Maschil in the Bir Halacha, Aval B'Yishuvay. This is a critical Bir Halacha to the understanding of this sugya and to the proper understanding of the Halacha L'maisa as we know it. Says the Chavetz Chaim here in the Bir Halacha, Hine, bepirusha de sugya de al tanai hein asuyos. When it comes to the explanation of the sugya of bate knesios that are made al tanai, yesh kama shitos. There are several different shitos in the Rishonim. Hainu, shitas ha-tosfos v'harosh. We have first the most chumra dika shita, which is the shita of Tosfos and the Rosh, who hold the b'yishuvai loy mahani tanai, that as long as a shul is inhabited and in use, no tanai helps. A tanai does not work. You can't make a tanai that will be effective so long as the shul is in use. Ubechorbanoi mahani. But if the shul nabach is vacated, it's destroyed, then already the tanai does help. Now, we recognize this shita of Tosfos and the Rosh right away, because this is apparently the shita of the Mechaber. The Mechaber said, you made it tanai, you made it b'shas binyan, so okay, the tanai could help b'chorbanoi. Once the shul is already destroyed, then the tanai will allow you to have at least certain other usages of that area, but b'yeshuvah, the tanai doesn't help, so the Mechaber would seem very clearly to be going with the shita of Tosfos and the Rosh. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. Then we have Vishitas Rashi V'Ha'or Zarua, which I'm going to call the most kuladika opinion. We have Shitas Rashi V'Or Zarua, Da'afilu B'Yeshuvah Mahani Tanai. Rashi and the Or Zarua say you can make a Tanai, and the Tanai is effective even B'Yeshuvah. Even while the shul is being used, you can make a Tanai. Then this kind of a middle ground. Then Vishitas Haramban V'Haran V'chein Das Harashba B'Tshuvos B'Chelik Dalet, and we find a similar shita in the Tshuvos Harashba B'Chelik Dalet, who kind of makes a middle ground here. These Rishonim, the Ramban, the Ran, and the Rashba, they say, first of all, they say something very machmer. First, they say, "Da'afilu b'churbanon loy mahani tanai." Even once the shul is destroyed, the tanai is not effective. Sheyishtamshu by lehedya, that you should be able to go and use that area for a usage of chayil b'shaloi midoichik, if it's not a pressing circumstance. Avol kishuhu midoichik, but b'shas adchak, you have a pressing need to use this area. Then afilu b'yeshuvan mahani tonight. Then you could use the shul even b'yeshuvah, even when the shul is still an active shul that's in use. So okay, now let's just be clear here. So again, we have the most machberdika opinion, which is that a tanai never helps b'yeshuvah. A tanai is never effective as long as the shul is in use. It's effective when the shul is b'churbanai. That's the sheet of Taisus and the Rosh, and that seems to be the sheet of the Mechaber. Then there's the most kuladik opinion, which is the sheet of Rashi and Yarzaruah, which is a tanai is fully effective, even b'yeshuvah, even when the shul is being used, and it doesn't have to be a shasat chak. A tanai is perfectly effective, and it allows you to make all sorts of usages of the Bais HaKnesses, even if it's not a shasat chak. That's the shita of Rashi and Yarzaruah. Then we have this shita of the Ramban, the Ran, and the Chuvas HaRashba, where they say it depends. If it's a shasat chak, then a tanai works, even b'yeshuvah. If it's not a shasat chak, then a tanai doesn't work, even b'chorbanai. Now, what's called a shasat chak? Says the Bir Halacha, midoichik kri. In the context of this halacha, shasat chak, an example would be kishehu lahachil ha'aniyim l'tzarich shah or lahashkivan sham. You have an influx of refugees into the town. You have aniyim coming into the town. You pashut don't have a place to put them. Shasat chak gedol mizu. So you could put them up in the shul. That's a shasat chak. According to the Ramban, according to the Ran, according to the Chuvas HaRashba, you would be allowed to do that even b'yeshuvan if you made it tonight. According to Rashi and Yarzaruah, you'd always be allowed to do it. According to Taisus and the Rosh, you wouldn't be allowed to do it, even midaychik. V'hinei, av sham mechaber hetik lidina, even though the mechaber takes lahalacha the b'yeshuvah loy mahani tanai, that b'yeshuvah loy mahani tanai, so the mechaber seems to follow the sheet of the Taisus and Rosh. Nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, Nirim Divrei Taz Bereish HaSiman, it comes out for the words of the Taz in the beginning of this Siman, Dikishuhu Midoichik V'Chanal, if we're talking about Shasat Chak, Yesh Lismoich Al Haramban, Da'afilu B'Yeshuvah Mahani. So what's the Chavetz Chaim saying? Even though we see that the Mechaber paskined like Taisus and the Rosh, but from the Taz we see, the Taz says that you could be soimich on the sheet of the Ramban, the Ran, and the Chuvas HaRashba, that b'shasat chak, midoichik, a tanai is effective even b'yeshuvam. And says the Bir Halacha, v'hadini mai, and the halacha is taka like the Taz, shekenu gam kein das haran v'harashba, because take a look, he says, we have, who paskins this way? The Ramban, the Ran, the Rashba, the gam yesh l'tzarif lazeh das Rashi v'Arzaruah, and you could add on to them Rashi and the Arzaruah, because they're even more makel than the Ramban and the Ran and the Chuvas HaRashba, to Sfira Lahu, because they hold afilu b'yeshuvan mahani tonight, that a tonight works even b'yeshuvah. So you have Rashi, if you're talking about a shasat chak, right, you want to use the shul for a shasat chak. You made it tonight. According to Rashi and Yarzaruah, there's no shaila. According to the Ramban, the Ran, and the Chuvas HaRashba, if it's a shasat chak, there's no shaila. So it's only Taisus and the Rosh that would answer it. So the Taz says we're not going to follow Taisus and the Rosh and what seems to be the psak of the Mechaber against all these other Rishonim in a shasat chak. V'da'oid, but furthermore, you should know, says the Chavetz Chaim, da'afilu l'das Rashi v'Arzaruah d'mahani t'nai afilu b'yeshuva. Even according to the most kuladik opinion of Rashi and the Arzaruah, that a tanai is effective even when the shul is still in use, Mikamakayim lekalus roish mamish. When it comes to a shaila of using the shul for mamish kalus roish, kigoin schoik, for joking around, v'hitol, mockery, v'kiyotzavai, pshita d'loi mahani. Then zikr the Tanai doesn't work, even according to Rashi and Yazarua. Kinemuchach b'gamar lehedya. Ayin sham, da'afil cheshboino yisasir b'sham dugam ke kalus roish. So for kalus roish, nobody, even Rashi and Yazarua, would not say that the Tanai helps for kalus roish. Okay. Now, against this backdrop, so now that we understand what the background of this halacha is, and we see these three different shittas in the Rishonim, and we see the psak of the Mechaber, and we see the psak of the Taz, and we see the Chavetz Chaim's psak to go like the Taz, now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Kan Lamed Aleph, Im B'shas Binyan, if you made a Tanai at the time of construction. Says the Mishnah Berurah, like we were Medayik, but if you made the Tanai later, Loi Mahani Tanai Klal. Tanai doesn't work if you woke up 6 months later to make the Tanai. You got to make the Tanai b'shas binyan. Ois kat lamed beis, hisnu olav. What were the words of the Mechaber? I told you got to be medayik in every word of the Mechaber. Im b'shas binyan Bais HaKnesses. So the first diak we made was it has to be at the time of construction, not later. The second diak we made is the Mechaber says hisnu olav. They actually went and made a Tanai. Says the Mishnah Berurah, mashma, the clear implication of the Mechaber is, dafka shehisnu beferish. They have to have actually gone ahead and made a Tanai. Aval mistama, but if they didn't make a Tanai, just minastam, lo yamrinan al Tanai hein asuyos. We're not going to make an assumption that the Bais HaKnesses is built on an assumed Tanai. This halach is only if you actually went and made a Tanai. So says the Mishnah Berurah, being medayik in the words of the Mechaber. And he takes this, not his own diak, Magen Avram. He takes this the diak that the Magen Avram makes. But Deloy kemasas binyamin. But this is not like the Shalos Teshuvas masas binyamin. Ubel Yerabba mitzadad lidina kamasas binyamin shemekel bazer. This is very critical for the halacha l'maisi here. The El Yerabba takes the position to paskin like the masas binyamin, that we could be makel, and we could say that there's an assumed Tanai. Oh. Now this is very, very, very critical for the discussion of the halacha l'maisa. So now, let's takako halacha l'maisa. So we have the three shittas in the Rishonim. Who do we paskin like? From the Bir halacha that I read to you, what he seems to say is that b'shas hatchak, we could be samech on the Ramban. So from the Chavetz Chaim, it sounds like really we have the psak of the Taisis and Rosh. The psak of the Taisis and the Rosh is that even if there's a Tanai, the Tanai is never effective b'yeshuvai. You can't make a Tanai that could be effective while the shul is still in use. A Tanai is only effective after the shul nebach is b'chorbanai. But b'shas hatchak, under oppressing circumstances, then we could follow the Taz and we could possibly like the Ramban. So b'shas hatchak, we could go ahead and we could say that the Tanai helps even b'yeshuvai. Okay, fine. So the biggest kula that we seem to be able to squeeze, not trying to squeeze kulas, but halacha l'maisa, the biggest kula that we see over here in the Bir halacha is that b'shas hatchak we could be samech on the Ramban. So b'shas hatchak we could be samech on the Ramban, and since it's a shas hatchak, we could say that the Tanai works even b'yeshuvah, even when the shul is in use. Now we take the kula of the El Yerabba, and the El Yerabba allows us to say that even if no Tanai was made beferish, we could assume that there was a Tanai, right? That's the Mishnah Berurah that we just learned. El Yerabba mitzadad ledina ka'amasas binyamin shemekel bazeh. That we could have an assumed Tanai. So now we look at a shul nowadays. We could say, okay, we don't know if the shul was built al Tanai or not, but we could say like the Masas binyamin that is an assumed Tanai. And then b'shas hatchak, we could go like the Ramban and say since there was a Tanai, the Tanai helps even b'yeshuvah, and therefore b'shas hatchak we could use the Bais HaKnesses for other usages. Comes along the Aruch HaShulchan. Aruch HaShulchan in this Siman, in his Sifhei. V'yesh l'tamaya, it's a great wonder. Al ma she'achshav mekilim ledaber b'Bais HaKnesses u'b'Bais HaMedrash achar tefillah kama dvarim shel choil v'nasa keheter. The Baal Mecharu Aruch HaShulchan says it's mamish a tumua gedayla. It's a great wonder that nowadays we're very makel, that after davening, people could mamish go around and shmooze. They talk to each other, kama dvarim shel choil, v'nasa keheter. Mamish like a heter. And he says it's a tumui, he doesn't understand it. Then he says, v'nirali, it seems to me, desvirale kitshitas haramban, that they paskin like the Ramban, which is what the Bir Halacha just said. Kishitas haramban, sheyisbaer, who explains, the Batei Knesiyah shel Bavel al Tanai hein asuyos afilu b'yeshuvan, that they hold, the Ramban holds, that Batei Knesiyos in Chutz Laaretz, Bavel means Chutz Laaretz, Batei Knesiyos of Chutz Laaretz, a Tanai is effective even b'yeshuvan, l'davar shemichrachad lakach, for a shas hatchak. Okay, all right. So far the Aruch HaShulchan isn't saying anything more than the Bir Halacha. What he's saying is that b'shas hatchak we can be saimach on the Ramban that a Tanai helps even b'yeshuvan b'shas hatchak. Now, what the Aruch HaShulchan is not speaking out is that we're also using the kula of the Eliyah Rabbah, the Masas Binyamin, that whether we know that there's a Tanai or not, we're going to assume that there's a Tanai. But now comes a huge, you have to be the Aruch HaShulchan to write this. How does this help you answer the Aruch HaShulchan's kasha? The Aruch HaShulchan's Tmua Gedolah was, how is everybody shmoozing in shul? So now he said the answer is that they paskin like the Ramban, that b'shas hatchak, a Tanai helps even b'yeshuvan, and we assume that there's a Tanai. So how does that allow you to shmooze in the shul? Says the Aruch HaShulchan an astonishing thing. Va'anachnu choshvim zeh lehechrich. This that the people are shmoozing, we look at it as a hechrich. We look at it as a need. We look at it as a requirement. We look at it as a shas hatchak. This that they're shmoozing is not stam. No, it's something that they need to do, and therefore it rises to the level of shas hatchak. Kol echad lefi inyanai. I don't know for sure what the Aruch HaShulchan means by those words. Va'anachnu choshvim zeh lehechrich kol echad lefi inyanai. Sounds to me like what the Aruch HaShulchan is saying is, each person that you see shmoozing in shul, it's very easy to run over and shush people. Do you know what's going on? Do you know what they're talking about? Do you know why they're talking? Do you know what pshat is? Do you know each person's situation? And my personal hergish in this is, it's a very interesting thing. Somebody once spoke very disparagingly about people who got into a fight in shul over aliyas. Now, certainly nobody should be fighting in shul over aliyas. I'm not trying to condone chas v'chalila, fighting in shul over aliyas or other kibbudim, etc., etc. But the Rishiva Zatzal once said, it shows you what they're machshiv as a kibbud. It shows you the kibbud that they want. They want the kibbud in shul. They want the kibbud by the Sefer Torah. That's what they're machshiv. And because that's what they're machshiv, that's what they fight about. I have a little bit of a similar, it's not the same thing, but a little bit of a similar hergish when it comes to this question of the shmoozing in shul. And that is that you want shul to be a major piece of a person's life. You want people to want to come to shul. You want them to want to spend extra time in shul. You want them to be willing to consider having a chavrusa shaf after davening in shul. You want them to want to hang out in shul. Part of wanting them to hang out in shul nowadays is they have to be at home in shul. Being at home in shul means that some of my socializing happens in shul. You want the guy to come to shul every Shabbos morning, whether it's raining or it's hot or anything else. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people that the chashivas at is not going to be enough to draw them to come to shul. The chiyuv of kriyas HaTorah is not going to be enough to draw them to shul. Now, maybe it should. Zikr it should. But it won't. But if they know that they're going to see their friends in shul, and they can chap a shmooze all week, they don't see them, and on Shabbos they can, that will draw them to shul. And you want them to come to shul. And my hergish is that this is what the Aruch HaShulchan is saying. Saying it's my hergish, that's what the Aruch HaShulchan is saying. The Aruch HaShulchan didn't write it. I'm not putting words into the Aruch HaShulchan's mouth, chas v'chalila. But the Aruch HaShulchan was a Rav. The Aruch HaShulchan was a Rav. The Chavetz Chaim was a Rosh Yeshiva. The Aruch HaShulchan was a Rav. He understood what makes a kehillah tick. He understood what makes mispalalim tick. And I think that's why he says, you want to know why they shmooze in shul? Because it's a dvar hechrich. It's not stam. Yeah, they're shmoozing about stam shmoozerai. But the fact that they're shmoozing with each other is a dvar hechrich. Kol echad lefi inyanai. Everybody lefi inyanai. Okay, now, that's the Aruch HaShulchan. So, again, I know I'm being repetitive, but just to keep things in order. So what we have over here so far, coming down to Halacha L'maisa, we have 3 shittas in the Rishonim. We see from the Chavetz Chaim, from the Taz, from the Eliyah Rabbah, from the Masas Binyamin, that what we could do is, b'shas chak, we could paskin like the Ramban. Paskin like the Ramban allows us to say that b'shas chak, a Tanai is effective, afilu b'yishuvan. Following the Eliyah Rabbah and the Masas Binyamin allows us to assume that a Tanai was made. And now we have an Aruch HaShulchan that says that even shmoozing in shul could be a dvar hechrich. And that's how he's matzdik the minig, that people shmooze in the Bais HaKnesses. But now, let's go a step weiter. Now let's go to the Rishiv Zatzal, to Rav Moshe, Zechet Tzadik Kosh Levracha. I'm not reading to you from the Igris, I'm reading to you from a Dirshu footnote. It's Dirshu footnote number 38 in our Siman. I don't know how to tell you what page it's on. It's following page 64, which is Lamed Beis in the Dirshu Mishnah Berurah, not the Amid that's connected to Lamed Beis. The next page, turn the page. It's footnote 38, which is a long footnote. It's the 1, 2, 3. It's the 3rd paragraph of the footnote, 3 lines from the bottom in the right-hand column of the page. When it comes to the minig in our times, Shenoyagim lahakel kidas Rashi v'ha'arzarua. So the Rishiv Zatzal takes the kula 1 notch further. He says, forget the Taz that we can be soymech like the Ramban. He says, we're soymech on Rashi and Yarzarua, that a Tanai works even b'yeshuvan, even shaloi mishasat chak. Shemoyel Tanai, afilu b'yeshuvam, fa'afilu b'shaloi shasat chak. Sha'arei b'har me'mekaymis noyegim lahakel. In many places, the minig is to be mekel, ba'achila ushtia, when it comes to eating and drinking, af shaloi b'shasat chak, even if it's not shasat chak. Uchemat b'chol ha'mekaymis, kemat everywhere, noyegim lahater lasei suda shlishis b'beis HaKnesses. They make shalshudas in the Bais HaKnesses. Sheyesh but tzarech mitzvah ktsas. He calls it a ktsas mitzvah. Av she'ein tzarech gadol b'davar. Shaharei yichel lechel b'bayis. You can't say that it's mamish tzarech mitzvah. Let people eat at home. V'chein noyegim larach kiddush b'Bais HaKnesses l'bar mitzvah l'chasen. They make kiddeshim in the shul. And for what? For a bar mitzvah. For a chasen. Av shaloi bar sheyesh mitzvah b'davar. Even though it's certainly not clear that there's any mitzvah in such a thing. Veitzel Chasidim noigim larch Bais HaKnesses afsudas rishus mamish. The Chasidim make a suda in the Bais HaKnesses, even mamish a sudas rishus. Kemoi b'yom a yartzeit, to give tikkun by a yartzeit, uchedoyme. Ubehechrich shenai hagim kedas Rashi v'ha'or zarua ukedele'el. It must be like I'm saying, says Rav Moshe, that we paskin like Rashi in the Or Zarua. Maybe this is a more recent development. That could be that makes the psak halacha. But Rav Moshe does right. Shall become Ein lasei suda shall rishus kolomer ala pas bebeis haknesses. You should mamish make a sudas rishus with washing and everything in a shul. The chain cost of a guy Meir Shalom al Yashiv linyan aminig larach kiddush bebeis haknesses kigal simchas bar mitzvah v'chedaima. So you see over here that Rav Moshe took it even a step further, and Rav Moshe said that we actually paskin like Rashi in the Or Zarua. So now it comes out that if you paskin like Rashi in the Or Zarua, that a Tanai is effective even b'yeshuvan, even shaloi b'shas atchak, and you go with the El Yerabah and the Masas Binyamin, that we could assume that there's a Tanai, that's matzdik, the minyan, that the minig, that seems to be nowadays, that really in the Bais HaKnesses, you could eat, you could drink, you could shmooze. Now, having said that, we still have a whole Siman Kuf Nun Aleph over here, which tells you the chomer hadavar of treating the Bais HaKnesses with proper reverence and proper kedushas Bais HaKnesses. In a way, all of these kulas make our lives harder, because now that you have all of these kulas, it's very easy to lose the reverence for the Bais HaKnesses and to come chas v'chalila even to talking lashon hara, rechilus, out and out litzonus in the Bais HaKnesses. So what I would say is that we see the halacha, we see the way the paiskim paskin for us, we see what we're allowed to do, and how Rav Moshe is matzdik the minig, and the Aruch HaShulchan is matzdik the minig, but at the same time, it's incumbent upon us to always remember that we are still in a Migdash Ma'at, and that the Migdash Ma'at demands a certain amount of reverence, a certain amount of seriousness. It's not a place for litzanos. It's certainly not a place for any dibur shel iser of any kind. It's certainly not a place for machlokes. It's certainly, so we do have to comport ourselves in the proper way. And certainly the times during davening when we're not allowed to speak, during Kriyas HaTorah, certainly during davening itself, during Pesukei Zimra, Berachas Kriyas Shema, we have to comport ourselves with the proper reverence for the Bais HaKnesses. Okay, I'm glad we got through that. Now let's go weiter. Ois kan lamed gimel, b'chorbonoi, pirush, oisai t'nai moyel shala'achar sheyecharav yeh mutar lehishtamish bai. Again, the Mechaber is paskin like Tosfos in the Rosh, who hold that the Tanai is moyel only b'chorbonoi, which means that after the shul is destroyed, then it would be mutar lehishtamish bai. Avakol zman shekayemes, but as long as the shul is still standing, ain't Tanai moyel, they hold that a Tanai is not effective. Ois kan lamed daled b'yeshuvai loy mahani. V'dafka la'achil. This is an interesting Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says that when the Mechaber says, and again, the Mechaber is passing like Tosfos in the Rosh, but when the Mechaber says that a Tanai is not effective b'yeshuvai, the Mishnah Berurah qualifies that and takes it down a notch. V'dafka la'achila ushtia. That's only in the context of eating and drinking. Or to go into the shul to escape the heat or the rain. Those are usages of the Bais HaKnesses that show kalus roish. Kalus roish doesn't only mean levity. Kalus roish means you're treating it very lightly. In other words, I came into the shul to escape the heat. That is kalus roish. That's treating the Bais HaKnesses without reverence. That's kalus roish. So that's when the Mechaber Paschal is like Tosfos in the Rosh and says the Tanai doesn't help. The Yesh Bazeh Mishum Kalas Rosh. Aval L'Sha'ar Tashmishim Mahani Tanai. But there are other usages that a Tanai would help for. For example, if you have to go into the shul to call somebody out. That's not Kalus Roish. Vayin Bir Halacha. Oiskan Lamed Hey, Kigoin Sriya. The Mechaber said that even B'Shas Churbanoi, you can't use the area of the shul for a tashmish beguna, Kigoin Sriya, like planting. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Proshet Tuah Dila Kol Advarim on the Skarm L'Kaman, B'Siman Kufton Gimel Sif Testem, Tashmisha Meguna B'Yoser. Certainly other types of usages that we're going to learn about in Siman Kufton Gimel that are mamish disgraceful, you cannot do even La'acha Churbanai, even with a Tanai. Aizkat Lamed Vav, another example of a tashmish that you can't do, Afilu La'acha Churbanai, that the Mechaber gave, was Cheshboinoi Sharabim. Why not? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Da'av Shemilsa. See, there's two different ways that you could learn the Mechaber. When the Mechaber says that even after a shul is destroyed, even if the shul was made al Tanai, you can't use it for a tashmish biguna like cheshboinoi shel rabim. Why does he point out cheshboinoi shel rabim? So one way to learn it is that cheshboinoi shel rabim makes it worse. The fact that the cheshboinoi shel rabim is a bigger problem than if it would be cheshboinoi shel yachid. That's the first way the Mishnah Berurah learns it. And what's the explanation? The av shemilsa. When it's cheshboinoi shel rabim, a lot of people are gathering, right? You need the whole board. Maybe you need the presidium. So you're going to get 20 people together where the shul used to be to make cheshboinoi shel rabim. That's more disgraceful to the mokum of the previous Bais HaKnesses because now a lot of people are involved in it. V'yesh bazeh mishum kalos roish b'yoser. Mashma b'pri begadim, and the pri begadim is mashma the other way, that really cheshbonos shel yachid are worse, because now you're using it for the cheshbonos only of a yachid. Cheshbonos shel rabim, at least it's tzarchei rabim, at least maybe that is a mitigating circumstance. And the Pri Begadim says that that's what the Mechaber was telling you, that no, you can't even use it for Cheshbonos shel Rabim. Umashma b'Pri Begadim, the Cheshbonos shel Yachid b'Churbanah muter. Cheshbonos of a Yachid b'Churbanah would be okay. The Lozem Moil Tanai. Or Rabbeinu Yerucham Mashma, the Nakat shel Rabim l'Ravusa, the Avshu tzarech Rabim, the Choshkei shel Yachid. Ois Cotton Lamed Zayin. This whole discussion of making a Bais HaKnesses al Tanai is only germane shebechutz laaretz. Shein kedusha san elamis. Because the bottom line is the kedusha of a Bais HaKnesses in chutz laaretz is not eternal. Sharei kishayavei hagoyel b'mehera b'yameinu, when Mashiach will come, Yirtzeh Hashem, very soon, tipaka kedusha san. The kedusha will go off. The Bate Knessia is in chutz laaretz. Ma shein ke b'Bate Knessia sheberetz Yisrael. But the Bate Knessia is in Eretz Yisrael, the kedusha will never go off. Ois kat lamed ches. Therefore, in Eretz Yisrael, the Mechaber said, "Loi mahani shum tanai." Lefidas Magen Avram le'el b'saf kat lamed dalad. Gam be'Eretz Yisrael mahani tanai l'shar tashmishin she'en be'em kalos roish. The Magen Avram actually says that a tanai could work in Eretz Yisrael for usages that don't entail kalos roish. So again, for example, going into the shul to call somebody out. Okay, let's go to Sif Yud Beis, second line down here on Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis. Says the Mechaber. Yesh, very interesting halacha, and again, very complex, and very, it's nogea l'maisa nowadays, but it's a very, very complex. Says the Mechaber, Yesh li zaher, you should take care, milhishtamish ba'aliyah shel gabe Bais HaKnesses, from using the floor above a shul, tashmish kavua shel gnai. A tashmish kavua, a permanent usage, that's the usage of gnai. Kigoyin lishkav sham. For example, sleeping there. Yeah. So, simple reading of the Mechaber, don't have an apartment above a shul. An apartment over a shul is a tashmish shel gnai. Over a shul. You don't make an apartment. You don't make living quarters above a shul. Usha ar tashmishim. When it comes to other usages that are not shel gnai, yesh le'estapik imutar le'ishtamisham. We have a suffix. There's room for a doubt whether or not you could use the floor above the shul for such things. Now, let's first go into the Mishnah Berurah here. Ois kat lamed tes. Tashmish kavua shel gnai. Miloshen zeh mashma, from the language of the Mechaber, it is implied. The lishkav sham b'derech mikre. If you have an empty apartment above the shul and you want to go upstairs, you're learning in the shul, now you want to go upstairs and take a cat nap, okay, that's arai. That's mikre. That's not kavua. That's mutter. Because to lay down and take a nap once in a while, that's not called that the floor above the shul is being used for tashmish shel gnai. If it's an apartment that's used all the time, that's tashmish shel gnai. But once in a while, somebody takes a nap, that doesn't make it a tashmish shel gnai. Okay. What is at work over here? What's at play over here? What is this halacha based on? It's very easy to look at this halacha and say, okay, I guess what the Mechaber is telling me is, it's not proper covered for the Bais HaKnesses that there should be a story above the Bais HaKnesses where it's used for tashmish shel gnai. Somebody's bedroom is over the shul. So you're sleeping, your bedroom is right over the shul? That's a tashmish shel gnai. That's inappropriate. That would be, I think, the way most people would just take a look at this. But that's not right. Not right. Take a look at the Ois Tzadik in the Beragoyla, and you'll see that this halacha is pulled from the Mordechai. It's a Mordechai in Shabbos. And if you take a look at the Mordechai, you'll see what this halacha is really based on and what this halacha is really being drawn from. And it's coming from a halacha that we learned earlier in, I believe, Siman Kuf Nun. In Siman Kuf Nun, we learned a halacha, Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph, Siman Kuf Nun Sif Beis, Ein Bainim Bais HaKnesses Ela B'Goyva Shalir. When you build a Bais HaKnesses, you're supposed to build it on the tallest point of the city. Umagbiyan Oisai, and you raise up the shul, Ad Sheyeh Gavaya Mikol Batei Ha'ir Shemishtamshe Behem, until the shul is taller than all of the other houses of the city that are used. La'afuke Beraniyos Umigdalim She'em Mishtamshe Behem. And this comes to exclude structures that are not built for usage. We spoke about decorative structures, but these are structures that are not houses that are lived in. Then we had a halacha in Sif Gimel. If somebody makes his house taller than the shul, either some say you force him to make his house shorter, or he could build up the shul. But what do you see from there? You see from there that there's a beferish halacha that the shul is supposed to be taller than any other of the houses. But which houses? Houses that are being used. Well, let me ask you something. If you have a shul and there's an apartment above the shul, what does that mean? That means that there's a house above the shul. So says the Mordechai, from the fact that we have a halacha that the shul has to be taller than all the other structures, then what's it called? I forgot what it's called. The something postulate of identity, right? If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. If you can't have a house taller than the shul, that means that you can't have an apartment above the shul. Because if you have an apartment above the shul, you have the house that's taller than the shul. Ta-da! So from the Mordechai, you see right away what's at play over here. That's the problem. You can't have a living space that's taller than the shul. Now, the problem with this is, right away, the second halacha of Sif Yud Beis, where the Mechaber says, "Usha'ar tashmishim yesh lehistapek imutar lehishtamisham." What exactly is the room for a suffix? If this halacha comes from that halacha, what room is there for a suffix? There doesn't seem to be any room for a suffix. You can't have a house that's being used that's taller than a shul. And the truth is that the Aruch HaShulchan is just blown away by this whole discussion over here. And the Aruch HaShulchan says, I mamish don't understand. Where is it? So first of all, he says right away, V'im kein harei also lehishtamish b'chol ha'ir b'makom gavayim mi Bais HaKnesses. V'im kein pshita shal gag Bais HaKnesses atzmai also lehishtamish. Of course you can't use what's above the shul. Then you're taller than the shul. V'im kein eiz suffix yesh bazeh. Why is there any suffix? He says he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand how there's room for a suffix. So, I mean, I think we have to come back to something that we said in Siman Kuf Nun. Let's see the Ramah first. Let's see the words of the Ramah first. Because the Ramah qualifies this whole halacha. Says the Ramah, bottom line here, Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, Haga. V'chol zeh dafka bebeis HaKnesses kavua. This whole halacha only applies to a Bais HaKnesses kavua, shenivne mitchilo lekach, where a building was built as a Bais HaKnesses. You build a shul, you don't build an apartment on top of the shul. You build a shul, you don't build rooms above the shul to be used for tashvish beguda. But if you have a house that was built, and then they made part of it a shul, then you could sleep on top of it and everything. So if somebody built a three apartment building, there's an apartment on the first floor, an apartment on the second floor, an apartment on the third floor. He rented out the top, he rented out the middle, and now he wants to rent out the bottom. And now a group comes, they want to rent out the bottom apartment to use for a shul. You're not going to say that you can't do it because there are people above it. This halacha is only when you built it as a shul. Over here, it wasn't built as a shul. So right away, halacha l'maisa for us nowadays, this knocks off a lot of the shilas. And I think also we have to go back to the Rambam that we mentioned in Siman Kuf Nun, where the Rambam said that this whole halacha of not building anything taller than the shul, that is, when you go to build a shul, you should make sure that the shul is being built on the tallest part of the city. But if you're not going to build a shul, I'm not going to build a shul. We need to find a place to bring the people together to have a shul. We found an apartment available for rent. I'm not going to build a shul. Then there could be things on top of it, and it's not a problem. All right, the time is already late, and I'm already out of steam. So we're going to stop over here, and Ms. Hashem will finish the Siman and go weiter next time. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discuss of limud HaTorah Shemi Megan against Klal Yisrael, the Baruch Shem Shesen, Yeshua's for first Panasich Shtuchim, to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the Bias Gal Tzedek, B'mehera v'yameinu, Amen. Be well.